let me do this as well. I was just telling Judy and Kaylie in the green room that last night, I don't think Mercury's in retrograde, but it kind of felt like it because the stars were not aligning for us to go live with our event last night. So I'm so glad that it worked tonight. So Judy and Kaylie, hello, welcome to Virtual Warwicks.
Very nice to be here.
Yes, thank you for having me.
I see the lovely dog.
One of two. She's better behaved.
Oh, she's
okay. She gets to love in.
Well, while Facebook's letting everybody know that we're here and that we're live, I'm just going to fill a little bit of your time. Tell everybody where we're at. We're Warwicks, if for those of you that don't know, is located in La Jolla, San Diego, California. Judy, where are you calling in from right now?
Connecticut, Newington, Connecticut.
There you go. And Kaylie, I think you said that you actually have a house here in California, but you're not there right now. So
I live in San Diego. I live in Imperial Beach.
Okay.
We bought a house there, but I'm teaching at Stony Brook in New York State. So I'm in Long Island, not too far from the university where I teach.
Awesome. So you're kind of down the south of where La Jolla and Warwicks is.
Yes, down from you, but I'm going to come visit now that I know you're there.
It's a great, so well, my sign says 1896. We haven't been in La Jolla since 1896, but we've actually been there since the 30s. And in the building that we're at since the, so it's quite Nancy's our 4th generation owner, so kind of a thing. So for those of you that are on Facebook with us right now, I'm going to be putting in how to order Judy's book and Kaylie's book also in the chat of Facebook. If you're in the San Diego area, we would love for you to come by the store and pick that up because there's lots of other great things to see at the store. But if you're not, we ship that book to you, no problem. Judy and Kaylie are going to talk for about 30-ish minutes, something like that. And then one thing we always love is audience questions. So if you have any questions, we'd love for you to put those into the comment section as well. And I will feed those into Kaylie and she'll bring those to Judy in the conversation. So with that, I'm going to introduce these lovely authors and then I will go away for a while. So Judy L. Mandel holds an MFA in creative writing from Stony Brook University. Her essays, articles, and short stories have appeared in Kevlar.com, 34th Parallel, The Tishman Review, Connecticut Life, ASJA Monthly, Complete Wellbeing Magazine, Connecticut Authors and Publishers Magazine, the Southampton Review, American Writers Review, and other publications. She is the co-founder of the Replacement Child Forum. She's here today to talk about her new book, White Flag. I don't know if you have a copy there handy, but if you do, want to show that. Yep. It's a great cover. It's a great cover, great book.
I guess we do.
Yes, we do. I love it. Joining her is Kaylie Jones. Kaylie has published 7 books, including her most recent novel, The Anger Meridian. She is the author of the acclaimed memoir, Lies My Mother Never Told Me. Her novel, A Soldier's Daughter Never Cries, was released as a Merchant Ivory film in 1998. She co-chairs the James Jones First Novel Fellowship, which awards $10,000 yearly to an unpublished first novel. That's fantastic. In 2012, she founded the imprint Kaylie Jones Books under the, I knew I was going to mess this up. Is it Aegis?
Yeah, fine with me.
Aegis, or how do you say it? I'm
Aegis or Aegis is fine.
Okay,
it's fine.
Vacation Books. So with that, you both have a wonderful conversation and we'll see you in a little bit.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Judy, it's so nice to see you. And we haven't actually been together in a long time. But I'll just tell the audience, I think we first met at a workshop at the MFA program at Southampton College. And we became friends. We've taught together. We've had these wonderful week-long residencies that we've done together, writers' workshops sort of all over the place. And you and I lived through this period together, both of us going through terrible struggles with people who were mentally, having a really hard time. And, your niece and my husband. And it was really, to read the book was almost to live it again, but live it differently because of all the work and research and amazing compassion and care that you put into putting the book together. So I'd read earlier drafts as you were working on it, and I found it fantastically helpful to me, in my situation, just given, even though the situations were different. And, we can talk more on that. But, and it was also right during the time of the Trump presidency. So it was really, for us, very, very difficult, because it was almost like, the world just was turned completely upside down. But in the book, there were a few questions I have, and hopefully, you will add to them, and we will get questions from the audience as well. But I'm interested in, and I think I know why, but I'm going to ask you why the title White Flag.
Sure. Well, white flag is traditionally the symbol of surrender, of course. And for me, it has a threefold meaning, where my niece was homeless in like the coldest winter in Louisville, Kentucky, and she couldn't find a bed. And I was searching for a bed, and the way she found one was through what they called white flag, which was when the shelters would raise a white flag when the elements got so that to leave someone out on the street would really be death for them. So it used to be a real white flag that they would put up in the buildings, and now it's a virtual white flag. So that was the first part of it that made me name it this. The second was that someone with substance use disorder, for them to recover, and that's a word that I try not to use too much, recover, but for them to look for help, they have to surrender also. They have to surrender to the fact that they need help. And that my niece never really got to that point. So the white flag is that part. It's also for myself to realize that I needed to raise my own white flag and surrender to what I could and could not do for my niece.
Yes, that's a great title. That works on three levels. I didn't know before about the white flag in cold weather. That's a really amazing and interesting thing as well. I know that you did a great deal of research on substance abuse or substance use disorder, and in your search to help her, you uncovered many things and read many books and statistics and so on. What was, if you can, point out a few of the things that you learned that were surprising to you, or that maybe helped you the most?
Well, there were a number of things. I think the main thing was that how complex this is, and that it's not just one thing. It's not just using a drug. It's what leads up to using the drug, and then what happens after, someone is already using the drug. So in my case, there's a connection with trauma and transgenerational trauma, and that was a surprise to me too. That can carry through generations when there's trauma like the Holocaust, which was some of the original research that was done with generations of Holocaust survivors. In my case, it didn't go back that far. It's the 1952 airplane crash that badly injured my niece's mother. And that follows through the thread of the trauma. There's also brain chemistry that changes when someone uses drugs for a period of time. The younger they start, the harder it is to stop. And so all of those like tentacles of the complexity it just really blew my mind when I started to delve into it.
Yeah, this issue of generational trauma, I think, is extremely important, and also the research that's been done recently on PTSD. I know Absolutely. You read van der Kolk's book, and also Gabor Mate, and all the patients who were interviewed, and the case studies in those books, all related to trauma, and very often trauma that was not just the child's trauma, but related to the parents' trauma and the grandparents' trauma. And Gabor Mate even talked about babies reacting, in the in
utero, absolutely,
or just small babies when the ghettos were emptied out and people were carted off. The babies screamed and screamed for days, even though they didn't know what was going on. They felt that they got it from their parents, and Gabor Mate's family got out of Hungary at that time. And I think that was his original interest in that. But so we're talking about generations upon generations. And as you're talking about brain chemistry, so you already have a predisposition in some way when you're, pregnant, let's say, and there's trauma around you, that then, transfers immediately to the baby before it's born.
Right.
And
right.
then, and if we don't deal with those traumas ourselves, then we don't act normally. And then the kids pick that up too. And so I think it starts more with that, like not like, oh, a lazy, oh, you're lazy, you went and started doing drugs because you're lazy.
Right.
It has a lot more to do with self-medicating before, because people are afraid. Now it's less, I think, right? People don't feel quite the stigma that they used to, but at that time, even 15 years ago or 20 years ago, nobody wanted to come forth and say, I don't feel well, I've got a problem, it's
right.
so I think
and you talk about stress and trauma, even stress when a mother is pregnant is, the cortisol bathes the baby in cortisol, which does change the brain chemistry right in utero, even before they're born.
Exactly. And that was news to me. I mean, I was really, that was fascinating to me that indeed, is the case, and they're finding that more and more. And then, so your niece, you made a promise to your sister, who was the one who was badly burned.
Right.
Your sister,
and when
mom.
she was dying, I made her a promise. She has 2 girls, and I said, don't worry, I've got them. And, it's when you make that kind of promise to someone that's very meaningful, it's hard to let go of that, for sure.
Yes. I was going to ask you, that's what I was going to, point out, that we all feel these, horrible feelings of guilt and helplessness, and not being able to help somebody, even when we haven't made a deathbed promise. And on top of that, you had this warrant, this connection to your sister that you really, really couldn't break. So you went through this with her Yeah. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, about the feelings that you had around those promises?
Well, the thing is, my sister was my older sister, but in her case, I always felt like I kind of was her protector in some way, even though I was the younger one, because she had visible scars. She had, social pressures that, people would stare, people would, say things. And I was always, trying to protect her from that. So there was always that dynamic between us. So when she was dying, and I knew her. I knew she would be worried about her girls, and so I tried to put her mind at ease and say, I would look out for them, which I meant, and which I definitely wanted to do.
And you surely did. As long as I've known you, you surely did. You surely did. That brings me to, I had another couple of questions. When you tried to help Cheryl, besides the times that she, sort of disappeared and refused help, but she had, several times where she was, imprisoned for a bit or was out in the streets, and you went looking for help for her. And let's talk about, like, for example, Louisville, which was the last place that she lived. I know that you really, spent hours and hours looking for help for her, for doctors, and for not just a place to live, because her life was really at risk, but you looked for help for her at a time when there was little available, I think. And
there was little available, and also she wouldn't agree that she needed help with drugs. She told me she wasn't doing any drugs, which, because of her denial, I couldn't look down that avenue. But even to find a place to sleep was very difficult. And I found out that the number of beds for women as compared to the number of beds for men is minuscule comparatively. There were hardly any beds for women in the shelters or anywhere that I could find. and the social services that she needed. You know, this is like a piece that I think when people get out of prison, it's something that they need so much of and don't have anything of.
Yep.
You know, a bank that will, you know, let them open an account, or, you know, to find jobs if you have a record, those kinds of things. So those pieces are so difficult that need to be changed. They need to be changed.
Absolutely. And I had the experience with my husband, who had, you know, very severe major depressive disorder, but other issues too, not just depression. He had, you know, some kind of, you know, paranoia as well. And if there hadn't been somebody to do the work, he could not do it himself. He could not make those calls and do that outreach and figure out those papers and figure out the paperwork that he needed to do. And the denial is the same, which I find fascinating. The denial for somebody who has a mental illness is almost exactly the same as the denial for somebody who is in the throes of an addiction of some kind, alcoholism, drugs, or whatever. The denial is the same. So the idea that somebody has to be willing, and by the time sometimes people are willing, it's already, they're almost too late or too late.
Sometimes
you know,
too late. That's
sometimes
right.
too late.
That's right.
And that's a really difficult thing to get through to people, that it's not, I mean, you know, for Cheryl, for example, it seemed to me that from her lovely, you know, letters to you and messages to you, it seemed to me in emails that she was also in a sense trying to protect you from knowing how bad it was for her. And that plays a role in this, I think, that the sort of worry and concern that the loved one who's trying to help, you know, they don't want them involved. My husband was like that. He didn't want me to know the extent of his illness because he didn't want me to worry. But meanwhile, there was nobody advocating.
Very similar.
You know,
It's very
you're advocating for her.
Yeah, they need your help, but they don't want you to be too involved because it hurts you. That's very true. She always wanted to put a good face on what was happening. You know, sending me messages about how she's got 3 job interviews, and, you know, then the text messages that I uncover, finding out, you know, a couple minutes after she wrote me that text, she was off finding drugs, which, you know, that was heartbreaking to realize, but it's the truth, and it's good to know, and your dog appreciates that.
Yes, I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay.
But that's such a difficult concept, I think. And for you, it was extremely difficult. I remember when you got the phone and had those messages, and to see that in, you know, 1 minute she's saying, "I'm doing great, Aunt Judy. I've got a job interview," and the next she's trying to get a hold of her dealer.
I'm sure it's so cool to have you here with me, because you did go through this with me.
Yeah. Well,
and I remember saying, "Oh, she's going to be okay. She's fine. I think she's going to be all right." You know,
and I wasn't
and really believing that. Yeah.
And I'd had more experience than you at that point with, you know, addiction, my mother dying of alcoholism, et cetera, that I sort of knew the patterns, and that there's a lot of, one of my favorite, you know, it's a joke, but it's not very funny, is how can you tell, you know, an alcoholic from a drug addict? And this is from recovery centers. They tell you this joke, and it is that, well, they'll both take your money, but an addict will help you look for it. Well, you know, so there's a sort of,
like kind of true. Yep.
And I, you know, I saw how hard that was for you, and how strong you remained, and you never gave up on, you know, wanting to try to help her get back on her feet. So talking about the system a little bit, what you discovered in, you know, what I read in your book, this lack of availability of treatment centers and of even shelters for people, women especially, you know, is staggering. And that was, you know, a few years ago, 2016, 17. Now, just the other day, where I'm living in Suffolk County, there were 7 overdoses in the high school from that awful drug that is now sort of
fentanyl.
fentanyl.
I bet it was fentanyl.
It was fentanyl.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many of those children, you know, survived that. I haven't found out. But so this is not getting
And
better.
you wonder, do the schools have Narcan on hand? They just did that in Connecticut, that they're having Narcan available in the schools, which they always should. They always should.
That's a
It
good
shouldn't be
point.
so hard to get it. Shouldn't be difficult to get it. I think that's the change that I would love to see, is that treatment is easier to find than the drugs themselves.
Right.
That's got to be
Wouldn't that
one
be?
change that happens. And you know, to keep them alive until they can wave their white flag is the goal. Whether you know, whether you have to help them where they meet them where they are, is what I'm saying. You know, help them if they need clean needles, find them
Yes.
for them.
Gabor
If they
Mate,
need, yeah.
yeah, that was he was a big, you know, activist for giving needles to addicts in Montreal, I believe it was, in Canada, where he lives.
And they found it opens the communication, and it leads to looking for more help, because they're talking to people. They see somebody cares about them, and I think that is essential for this, and to help them find medically assisted treatment is also.
Yes, and let's go back to the trauma angle for a second. You know, in his book, and I think also, you know, Vander Kolk, whom you quote in your book, talk about the development of the brain, you know, when you're very young, and how trauma can completely affect that. You know, it seems to me that we're not dealing with the source of the issue, right? When we're talking about, oh, he's an addict, right? Or she's an alcoholic, he's an addict. Right. You know, that the underlying pain, let's say Cheryl's pain, was connected very deeply to the story of your first memoir, which is another fabulous memoir that was a bestseller. That memoir, which was about your family and replacement child. Basically, you were the replacement child in your family to replace your sister who passed away in that fire. In that, you know, the plane fell on your house. A piece of the fuselage of the plane fell, and your sister. Linda was the one who was so severely burned, and so Linda had two daughters,
and that was Cheryl's mother. That was
Cheryl's mother,
Linda.
Right. So Linda carried that trauma, and so did you. Even though you were not there, you inherited all of that from your position in the family as a helper and sort of, maybe caretaker is the wrong word, but defender for your sister, and you know, you had this huge responsibility.
I do believe that. I do believe that now. I mean, especially after, you know, writing my way through that book and figuring that out and finding the replacement child condition. You know, they used to call it syndrome, but I hate that word, so I call it a condition. But that's very true. And not only that Cheryl had that piece of it, which her mother had a difficult life. There's no getting around that she had trauma after trauma after trauma, with surgeries and social, you know, issues and everything. It was difficult. There's no way a child does not feel that or see that. And then combined with, you know, her immediate traumas, you know, I found there was some sexual abuse in her childhood. And, you know, combining all of that is, you can't just treat the substance use. You have to go back and, as they're saying now, dual diagnosis treatment, you know, treating the conditions before and during and after. And that's so important.
And so difficult, because
I learned, and so difficult.
Because who wants to go back there and deal with that too, right? It's so painful. And so many people,
hard.
Yeah, and it's blocked. I think part of trauma, part of PTSD is a kind of scrim we put up. So when certain things happen, we don't see it or we don't hear it. You know, it didn't happen. Some part of the brain shuts down. So we can't even let it in, you know, to.
And for Cheryl, I know she took it on herself. She blamed herself. She said, you know, she felt unworthy. If in every letter that she wrote me, there was some element of, you know, I'm not worthy. And, you know, I tried to, in my letters, say that she was, but she felt that so deeply that that was definitely part of the issue.
Right. And that's a huge one. And that's years and years of therapy and of looking at that stuff, you know. So you call this an investigative memoir. I'd like you to talk a little bit more about that. Was that through the work, the research you did, and the physical?
I think the investigative for me was, you know, investigating the answers to all the questions I had. the questions of, why did this happen in the first place? And why couldn't she stop? And what can I do? Or what can people do? And, the complexities of substance use disorder. And so there was a lot of investigation and, trying to answer those questions and block out the answers that I thought I had, which were not always right. So
that you had
me,
before, you mean before you started, and that changed your perception as you went.
It did.
Yeah.
It took a lot of the stigma away from it and the shame. And I think that is such a big ingredient to why people don't get help and why their families turn against them, basically. And once you remove that and look at substance use disorder like you look at diabetes, that it's a disease that needs treatment, and not to call. I think language has so much to do with it now. If I was rewriting this book, I would try to replace the word addiction in it, which is difficult to do. But I think language is very important. And calling it substance use disorder, I think, relieves a lot of that stigma and shame, which is
That's a very good point. That's a very good point. Somebody told me the same thing about the word committed suicide or committing suicide, that saying it in other ways, that almost puts a sort of almost legal term on it, the illegality of it. It makes it sort of a crime, which changes the whole way you perceive that when you say that sentence, and in fact, drug addiction and alcoholism at that level is a slow form of self-destruction. It's a slow form of suicide, I believe. So you're going to read a few minutes for us, but before we do that, would you tell us, what do you hope your readers get from the book or take away from this book? What is your biggest hope on that?
If they have someone in their life who has substance use disorder, I hope that they remember who they are. They remember they're the same person that they've always loved, and treat them that way. Meet them where they are. Keep them alive. Keep them from disappearing. Offer to get them treatment if they want it. Offer to get them whatever they need at the moment while still protecting yourself. But really to still love them. I think that is what I hope that somebody comes across with from this.
So read for us, Judy, just a short passage you said you were going to read, and then we'll open it up to questions from the audience. I'm just going to turn off my camera while you read.
Oh, okay. This is a short piece, short chapter, and it's called Our Prison Visit. It's kind of a little bit into the book. It starts out with a quote from The Kite Runner, from Khalid Hosseini, and the quote is, "When spring comes, it melts the snow one flake at a time, and maybe I just witnessed the first flake melting." So this is called Our Prison Visit. I learned on the prison website about video call visits, a kind of Skype, a schedule a virtual visit. We're both excited to see each other. Is Cheryl as nervous as I am? 15 minutes before our first video chat, I perch my laptop on 3 big books so she isn't looking up my nose on the screen. My bookcase is my backdrop, and I check the view behind me to ensure nothing is amiss, although I have no idea what may be inappropriate in this situation. Books like Naked Lunch, Junkie, Lit. I decide to leave Burroughs and Carr where they sit. We have not seen each other in more than 2 years. I comb my hair and practice my smile in the mirror because I know my face is easy to read and I may look worried. My idea is to sculpt her vision of me. Positive Aunt Judy, funny Aunt Judy, competent Aunt Judy who can still fix things. Maybe we both still need to believe this. The system is not smooth linking up, and I wonder why they don't just use Skype, which works much better. After a couple of misfires, static, and shutoffs, I see her on the screen. Cheryl looks like herself. Why does this surprise me? Her hair is still long and black, but shows 3 inches of gray roots. I feel tears welling up at the first sight of her. She smiles, but her eyes apologize for being in this place. Her loose prison garb with wide horizontal black and white stripes Looks like a costume for convicts in an old movie. She sits at a round table in a large room, maybe a cafeteria. Other inmates are visible on their own calls, milling around or passing behind her. A large woman with wild black hair wafts past and peers into the screen at me. I almost wave to her. Cheryl shoos her away with, "Excuse me." Cheryl gives me the same exasperated look she'd give her mom when asked to clean her room. Then she quickly laughs. The light in her eyes makes my chest ache and my eyes water again. It's a connection we have, being able to laugh together at life's absurdities. When she exaggerates clearing the area behind her with a swipe of her hands, like an umpire calling a base run safe, we both crack up. I can hardly stop laughing, just like I used to do with her mother. Irrationally, I am overwhelmed by the impulse, get her the hell out of there. My whole dead family seems to be hovering, imploring me, do something, get her out. She's ours. After a few how are yous, the conversation lags, and I feel a mild panic. I don't want to waste our precious time together. I have so much I want to say, but I know I can't say it all now, so I say none of it. I recognize the nausea that grips me, a paralysis, stopping me from bringing up anything that might cause conflict during this short virtual visit. I remember Cheryl loves animals. Want to see my cat? I pick up my very fat orange cat who has been nuzzling my ankle and hold him up to the screen for as long as he will allow. Meet Simon. He squirms free and I drop him. That laugh again, lifting me. I flash on her two cats and two dogs she abandoned. Oh my God, he's beautiful. What the heck do you feed that kitty? He's huge. Anything he wants, the old joke. The harsh edges in her eyes have softened now, and I'm so glad I thought of this. Maybe I should get a dog. She thanks me again and again for helping her and being there for her. I'm grateful that she seems to be okay, even if it's only on the surface. Only at this one moment. I tell her that I've given Debbie the information about doing a video visit. We talk for our allotted 15 minutes about how working in the kitchen is good work duty and makes the time pass quickly, and how much she likes the book I sent her, The Kite Runner. Our call's finished, and I've managed to hold back my tears until the screen goes black. But I wish we had talked more about Kaylie Hosseini's book and the characters of Hassan and Amir, about how facing hard truths helps us to heal, but wounds left untreated will fester.
That's a beautiful passage, really beautiful. The questions are now open. If anybody would like to ask, this is a great opportunity to really speak to somebody who knows a lot about the subject. So please feel free to ask, and the questions will be fielded for us. Here's a question. Judy, can you tell us what your process was? How long did you work on the book? Hello, Kaylie. Hello. I am so happy that you wrote the story, that you wrote Cheryl's Truth. It can be a great conversation starter for many people to begin to heal. So your process in developing the story, how you went about it.
And thank you for saying that. Yeah, the process was a little grueling. I think part of the difficulty was that I was still grieving, because this is not a recovery story. My niece did pass away. She overdosed. So, I was going through grief at the same time. My process was to collect what I called the evidence. I put together all the pieces. I collected her letters and her journal entries and, her cell phone texts that, we had been going back and forth, and other people. I could see all of them. And her medical records and everything, put all of those pieces together and tried to see the theme through it. Tried to see where the answers would be. The research that I did was really the eye-opening part and filled in a lot of the blanks for me. So that was how that started. And then I talked to Kaylie a lot, which helped me. That helped me a great deal. And so that was it took about 3 years to write it.
Right. That question was from Mary Ellen Walsh. So just letting you know who that was
Mary
from.
Ellen.
Yes.
Hi, Mary Ellen.
So that part, and I recall, going through this as you were, I mean, I didn't go through it, but as, witnessing and being there, going through my own bizarre, deal with mental health issues for my, my husband, that on some days I wanted to tell you to walk away, let it go, walk away, just close the door. But then I realized that that was not possible for you. And for many people, it's not. Some people do walk away. I have a friend who's walked away from her son, and she hasn't seen him in about 10 or 11 years. And he had a major addiction. I won't use the word addiction. He had substance abuse,
Yeah,
condition. And
sure.
finally, after, being lied to and robbed, many cases, she closed the door. And that, seems to work for her. But she also didn't have this, well, as a parent, I think we all feel that anyway, that it's
Right.
your family, it's your child or your, but you never lost hope. And you also never gave up that, promise, I think, to your sister. And I think that, that was extremely brave of you. Did you ever consider, or I remember at one point you were going to have her come live with you. I remember that.
Right.
And you were
Right.
discussing it with your husband. And I think, maybe I'll let her come live with me. And I kept saying, no, 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 don't do that. What do you think now?
You weren't the only one. People did say that, that would be a mistake. I don't know if that was a mistake to not have her come live with me. I'm not sure. It may have been a terrible mistake. If I had gone there, and that might have been another thing I could have done, but many people said it would be a terrible thing to have her come live with you. So I didn't do it. Do I regret it sometimes? Yes, I do.
You do regret that.
I do. I do sometimes think maybe that would have been the right thing. Even though inside I think that it would not have helped. But it's difficult to, in my case, I didn't walk away, but I didn't do that ultimate thing where, to have her come to me.
And that's a huge struggle that
way.
many people deal with these situations. There's another There's another question from Jean Endy. Your book is amazing. Thank you for writing it. Can you say something about Cheryl's relationship with her sister, Debbie, right? Why did one sister become so lost and not the other one? How did the sister feel about your research and writing?
Well, that's a very interesting question, Jean. For the time I was writing this book, Cheryl's sister and I were not speaking to each other. We had some issues, how families, that happens sometimes. So we weren't speaking, and I wasn't able to, and I wish we were, because there are a lot of things I wanted to ask her, which I've now been able to ask her, because we're now together and talking, and better than we had been ever, which I'm so grateful for. So she has read the book. I had her read the book before it came out, and I wanted her to see it before it was published. And she was fine with it. She had some things she said I got wrong, which I figured I would, but she was fine with it. And she thought Cheryl would be fine with it. She thought it would enlighten people and would help people. So she was good with that.
And what about personality?
She still is. In fact, she's still going to, actually, we're going to be doing a little event together.
Oh, great.
In November. Yeah.
So ultimately it was healing for her as well. The book was healing for her as well. That's such a good thing.
I think
but
so.
You think it's about
so.
Strength of character, or maybe birth order, or was Debbie older than Cheryl, or younger? Younger.
I think sometimes you either go in a certain direction that you see, or you react against it. And I think for
true.
Debbie, and I wish she could speak for herself here, but I think she reacted against it, and she was afraid of using drugs.
Right.
And so she didn't do it at all, which I'm very grateful for too, for her.
Right. I think that's exactly right. I think that kids can go in either direction, and they're both difficult, because one is almost like you shut off a certain part of yourself too, in sort of rejecting rejecting it all. And then the other one is, you know, maybe the more sensitive, more fragile person goes sort of down that path. You know, but it's
Right.
never black or white. Obviously, there's, you know.
That brings up something I wanted to mention, that I listened to, Gabor Mate, who has a new book out, of course.
Oh.
And he was talking about how the relationship between, people that have substance use disorder, but also who are very creative. And, sometimes we say that, people on the edge are sometimes very creative. And what he was saying is that these people are more sensitive to everything around them. So it depends on what their environment is, but they're going to be overly sensitive to whatever is thrown at them. And whether they decide to be, or it reveals itself as being an artist or a painter or a writer, or they self-medicate with substances. It can be two sides of the same coin. And the oversensitivity, I think, relates to my niece, Cheryl. She was a very sensitive soul.
Yes, I think that's very true. And if you look at the number of artists and writers, especially writers who struggled with substance abuse across the ages, it's quite extraordinary. There is a comment from Pam Partridge who says, "Hi, Judy, so proud of you." It's
Hi,
very
Pam.
nice. And that's it for the questions. I'm delighted that you asked me to be part of this with you. I really do feel like I sort of lived through it with you, on the side, but I saw your courage and your determination to get the book written. And I think you really did a fantastic job, and you did a great service for a great number of people who have family members or themselves even who struggle with this. And I've seen recently, especially where I am right now out here, that there's that the epidemic of substance abuse is really intensifying. It has not helped. They cut back now everybody's covering their own butts, and doctors will no longer prescribe the legal pain medication. And now, because a lot of people are actually in pain, have now turned to illegal drugs, many more.
Right.
And it's truly become something that even President Biden has said recently, we have to do something about the mental health care for our young in this country. So clearly we're not alone in this.
Right. And the pandemic did not help with isolation and mental illness. It
certainly made things
increased it
much worse. Much worse. But even before then, it seems to me like there's whatever is happening, sort of globally in our country, we're seeing it really now affecting our very young. And I think that's something that we really, really, as a people, must pay attention to. And the idea that this is a weakness, moral weakness to, succumb to any kind of, you don't like the word addiction, but I'm trying to think of another way of saying it,
okay.
to substance abuse, the need to ease our pain, it's not due to weakness or to stupidity.
No, it's I think that's one of the main things we have to get rid of, is that shame in that it's a weakness. I think that hurts more than anything, because then people won't come forward and they won't talk about it and they won't get help because they're ashamed. And, I saw that, in my own family. How long did it take me to even talk to you about this? It was difficult. I remember the first time I did, as a matter of fact. And it was hard. You have to gauge, is this person going to judge me because somebody in my family, has a substance use disorder at that point, an addiction, you would say, or is in prison. All of this is a shame that you don't talk about. And that hurts even more. That we've talked about the trauma of silence. And,
yes.
In my family, that was a big piece of the issue, was the silence around all of
not talking about it, right? Not talking about the accident, not talking about the fact that this had happened and the child had died,
right.
this child was suffering. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And
Right.
that generation, certainly, I mean, my dad was a war veteran and he never talked about it. He wrote about it, but he never talked about it. And, I think I inherited a fear of war, due to his nighttime terrors, things.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't know actually, but then I find out
We should
later.
say we should say your dad, James Jones.
Well,
So people know.
I also found out,
Yeah.
much later from a biographer of his that three of his father and two uncles, so 3 out of 4, took their own lives. So there was a
Oh,
very
boy.
severe
Ah.
depressive thing going on. And as you're talking about oversensitivity, perhaps, oversensitivity
Mhm.
to the world. And so I think that's true of
Mm.
Cheryl, that she was extremely sensitive and loving and kind and a compassionate person.
She was.
Yeah.
And that's how, that's the other thing is I hope comes through the book is, to remember her as that. She was funny and she always was, laughing, and she read every book that she could get her hands on. I sent her a bunch of books when she was in prison. She read them all so quickly. And, I just had to keep them going, keep them coming. And, she helped her parents, her grandparents, especially, when she was well, and she had a big heart.
Yes.
She was a good soul.
Yes, absolutely. And you're a wonderful soul. And I'm very happy to be your friend.
And I am too. And it means a lot to me that you were here with me. Thank you.
It's a true honor.
This was an amazing conversation, such an important topic. And Judy, I hope that everybody picks up a copy of this book. I think it will help so many people. And I thank Deb Ziff for bringing this to my attention.
Yep.
Deb, it's been wonderful having you, Judy. Is there
great to be here. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Is there some place that do you have a website? Where do you want to direct people to connect with you?
Yes, my website's judymandel.com.
Okay.
It's very easy, just my name, just judymandel.com.
Okay. Judy, you might want to go to the Warwick's page after and look at the event, because there's some great comments there, and there might have been a question or two that we missed that we didn't quite have time for. So thank you all that are watching for your
Thank you.
And Kaylie, for you, is there some place that people can follow you and what's happening in your world?
KaylieJonesBooks.com is the website for my publishing company. And I've sort of given up on my own website. I have too much going on, but I'm also on Facebook as Kaylie Jones. There's Kaylie Jones Author and Kaylie Jones Books, and my own private page also on Facebook. And I'm happy to receive direct messages or any comments from anybody. That would be very nice.
Perfect.
Totally happy with that.
Yeah, me too.
Excellent. Okay. Well, this is going to stay. This will reside on Facebook, Judy. It'll be on YouTube as well, so you can share that out with everyone. So everybody, thank you for, it was such an uplifting and great conversation on a topic that is super important. So thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Bye, Julie.
You too.